Hi everyone, I'm David. I'm a wedding and portrait photographer from down here in Melbourne, Australia. What I want to talk to you today is I read an interesting article coming up from light stalking. Basically, he's talking about who are the big players in the photographic world today. So I thought that we'd have a look at that and basically discuss it ourselves, where you think that the industry is going, whether you think that digital SLRs have had their day and it's gone more to mirrorless. So I'll talk to you about that as well. But before we do that, I want to show you this really funny article that I just found. It's actually from this person called David Vega, and he's got Hire a Professional Photographer. So I thought we could start with just looking at this because I thought it's quite funny, and you may want to share it yourselves. But we'll have a look at that and just see how it goes. Now I hope it doesn't reverberate through here. It might, because I've got it through the speaker here on my system, but we'll have a look.
When you get bad wedding photos, you get depressed. When you get depressed, you have empty picture frames. When you have empty picture frames, your friends think you're crazy. When your friends think you're crazy, they hold an intervention. When they hold an intervention, you hear things you don't want to hear. When you hear things you don't want to hear, you follow your husband. Then you can't stop following your husband. When you can't stop following your husband, you throw mysterious garbage bags into the ocean. When you throw garbage bags into the ocean, you end up on cops. Don't end up on cops. Hire a professional photographer.
I actually thought that was really funny. It cracks me up, actually. I mean, I do share things like that sometimes, but it's good if you can do it lightly. You know, it's interesting to sort of see. I'll just bring up the live chat so we can see if anyone's online at the moment. Yeah, so what I thought we'd talk about today is I read this article on who are the big players in the photographic world today. I think it was shared on Petapixel or somewhere. I'm not sure. It's actually lightstalking.com. So I thought we'd have a talk about that, and it's discussing basically who are the main players in the industry today. And obviously, if I scroll down through this article, you can see that it's showing Nikon and Canon are basically the main two that the industry knows about. If anyone is online, just say hi guys, just so I can see you checking. But basically, the main two in the industry at the moment still are Nikon and Canon, but there's other manufacturers now that are coming on board, and this is why I'm wondering what you guys actually think where we're going. I've done the big switch. I actually switched from Nikon to Sony. That just worked for me. It doesn't mean that it's the right thing to do. I mean, others are going to obviously Fuji, some are staying on Nikon, some are staying on Canon, but it's an interesting article when you read it, how it's talking about how the digital SLR market is still the largest market. It's saying here it's by far the largest market section in the market. Pentax is the only other company still producing digital SLRs at the moment, but they're using Sony's SLT technology. But you've got to now look, I suppose, at the other players that are coming in, like Sony. You've got Panasonic, you've got Fuji, all these other camera companies that are starting to become quite big in the industry. And it seems to be that Nikon and Canon, and whether you're going to agree with this or not, but Nikon and Canon have had an issue with basically innovating enough on their cameras. And that's probably been one of their main problems, and they're protecting their main film areas. Like if you look at the new Canon, the 5D Mark IV, that's got huge issues as well with its file format and things like that. It's still a great photography camera, but it's had issues with the video side. But apparently they are going to do a firmware upgrade which may address some of those issues. But the thing is, they're just not innovating as much as what mirrorless cameras tend to be. And that's why I thought we could have a discussion on that. There's a couple now saying in here that people are afraid of change. Ricky Mantone, hi David, love your work. Thanks Rick, thanks so much. Shaylowen95 says people are afraid of change, and I think that is half of the problem. You know, I think people are afraid to change and they get set in their ways. The reason why I changed mostly was because I was I mean, I am a bit of a geek, and I love technology. And I did find that Nikon for me just wasn't innovating enough. There was another main thing with it as well, was because I mostly shoot weddings and fashion. So for me, lugging around these big cameras, I did have the high-end Nikons like the D4S and the D810 and the A750, but the D750. But it was the weight as well of lugging these cameras around. Admittedly, some of the Sonys, if you do go and get the G-Master lenses, they're almost as big too as what a digital SLR can be as well. So that sort of negates one of the things about weight. But for me, I'm mostly using primes. I am going to take people through what lenses I use again eventually, but I'm just using mostly primes. So for me, it is incredibly light compared to what I used to lug around with my digital SLRs. I used to get sore backs from a full day of shooting weddings. Whereas now I don't have that aching at all, and I'm carrying around 2 cameras basically over my shoulder or on my waist. Shalane said, how else can you explain people wanting to buy an inferior product like the 5D Mark 1V versus the A7R? I think sometimes too people are linked in glass as well, and I don't want this to be a slamming thing about Nikon is better or Canon's better or you know, the mirrorless are better. It depends really on what you want to shoot. If you're talking about true technology, well, the mirrorless is the way that it's gone. And the technology that you can get in mirrorless cameras is far superior to what you can get in a digital SLR market. But there are some issues. Focusing, for instance, is still not as good if you're doing sport as what it is in a digital SLR. Low light focusing is still not as good as what I could have got with my Nikon gear. But you have to work around that. But that's going to change. The next iterations of, you know, the next probably A7R 3 or 4 or whatever that's going to come up, you can guarantee that the focusing is going to get better. So those issues are going to change as time goes on. 4K is another issue. I just don't understand why the digital SLR manufacturers are holding that back when it's so readily available in the mirrorless cameras. The Panasonic 4K is amazing. I mean, there is issues with it doing autofocus at the moment, which you can see all on the net, but if you're talking about just the way that it shoots, the log profiles that you're getting there, things like that, the 4K native inside the camera, it's incredible. Panasonic's no time limit. Now, I've got over that time limit with my Sonys as well. There's just a simple hack that you can download and it stops that time limit as well. And I've done that and there's no problems running it. So that's one way of getting over that as well. I'm just going to see what sort of questions we're coming up with at the moment. Zoom Chris said, hi mate, how are you? We've got another one. So they don't get the most of the cameras because it requires learning new things, and some people rather just stick to what they know. And that is true sometimes. I think sometimes people are a little bit scared of change. I went through this when film was out because I originally used to shoot film, of course, but when that changed, a lot of people didn't or refused to go to digital technology, and those photographers ended up losing their business. They went broke. I got in at the ground. I actually started teaching digital photography through RMIT, the university where I lectured, and I was teaching, you know, a 2 megapixel high-end camera that was around about $40,000 in those days. It was ridiculous, but I still got in the ground and I could see where it was going to go. My first Canon Kodak camera that I got, the digital camera, was I think it was a 1 megapixel camera. And again, I paid over $1,000 for that, and it was 1 megapixel. People used to laugh at me because I bought that, but I could still see where it was going to go. So you do have to embrace change, and I'm hoping Nikon and Canon do embrace change and they go down this mirrorless path, because if you could use those lenses on their mirrorless bodies, it'd be fantastic. And I do want competition. The best thing for this industry is competition. Let's have a look. Rick Mentone said there is something liberating about going shooting with a small mirrorless. And now there are almost as competent. It's just a matter of time before they are overtaken by smaller mirrorless cameras. Yes, well, it is. Look, I do think unless Nikon and Canon innovate, within probably 1 or 2 years, the way the mirrorless market's growing, they're going to be in real trouble. So I hope that they do continue to innovate. Because like I said, I think it's great for the market, because you just can't stop innovating. If you do stop innovating, you will be left behind. And I'm hoping that they're not thinking like IBM. Look what happened to IBM. So you've got to be very careful in following old technology and, you know, not moving forward. I think it's Giuseppe said, "Hi David, should I wait for the A7 Mark III?" I'd wait. Look, I'd wait at least until after NAB or something and see what happens there, because I think there's going to be a change, or even the A7 III may be released. So I think if it was me purchasing at the moment, I'd be holding off. They do tend to be more consumer-based mirrorless, and that's one of the arguments that people say they're like a consumer-based item. I don't care about that. I just care about the lenses. The body, to me, I'll just throw away and get another one. To me, the body is just a mechanism of getting the picture. So they are constantly updating, and that's why I'm saying I'd wait. I wouldn't buy one at the moment. Zoomchris said, should you wait until NAB? Yeah, I think they should. It's definitely worth waiting for NAB. It's only a couple of weeks away. David, are you still using the A7R2 grip? No. Look, I've got it. When I bought that initially, I thought I was going to use it in weddings because I thought there was an issue with batteries, and it would then be using the two batteries instead of having just the one. The problem is it defeated the purpose of going minimalistic, and that's what I want now. I just want to be minimal in everything that I carry, and having that big battery, extra battery compartment on the bottom, it made it just look like I was using my D4S. And look, admittedly, if you do end up going portrait, so you're turning the camera that way, it can be great to focus. So it does give you that ability instead of turning your hands around. It's great to be able to do that, but I don't use it for that. And I probably should sell it, but I don't know. I don't sell much. Rick Mantone said Nikon discontinue their mirrorless line. Yeah, I think they did just recently, didn't they? Look, they have to change that thinking, that they've got to be coming out with something eventually that is going to change that old thinking, and I really hope they do. So I'm going to scroll down this article because I also want to talk to you about the ever-expanding mirrorless market. It's saying this, the major players now are Fuji. I would love to use the new Fuji cameras. Everything I've heard about them is amazing. I had a discussion on the other YouTube video I put up about the firmware. Sony sucks with firmware, and I hate that part about them. They will force you to get a new camera instead of letting these things that they could add into firmware, like upgrading your menu system, things like that. Fuji are releasing firmware for cameras that were released years ago, and they're adding 30 or something features. It's incredible. So, you know, if you are in the market for a great mirrorless cameras, Fuji is amazing, and I seriously would love to have a play with Fuji, and one day I might. I am committed to Sony at the moment because I've obviously purchased all the lenses and other things, but if I was seriously looking now, I'd seriously be having a look at Fuji because the results seem to be great. The new cameras are really, really good. Sony obviously are pushing the boundaries with full frame. That's one thing. With Fuji, the issue that would stop me going down that line is the full frame. I do love the full frame for the depth of field. It's just so much nicer when you've got a full frame lens or sensor, because you can get that gorgeous rendering in the out of focus areas. You still can get that with Fuji, but it's still not the same. If you compare the two side by side, you'll get a much better look. Well, what I believe is a much better look in the full frame. But having said that, I use the A6500 all the time. But even the A6500 is a bigger sensor. So that's probably what would hold me back from going down Fuji. But if there's any Fuji people watching this, guys, chime in and tell me what you think about it. As cameras, I love the look of the camera. I think it's very retro. It's beautiful. You know, all the dials are there. Very easy to get at. Apparently the menu system is really good. Olympus, I had Olympus. I had the Olympus before I went to Sony. I had one of their smaller cameras, and I really liked the Olympus. Again, they're very well made and very good quality products. Panasonic, I had the GH4. The reason why I sold the Panasonic GH4 was because the low light sucked. It was terrible. Compared to what I had with my Nikon, it was awful. And at the time, the only way for me to go, because I shoot Fusion, which is a mix of video and stills at weddings, I needed a camera where I could switch between both and have good low light for things like receptions and stuff. So I went down the Sony path and sold my GH4. The GH5 may change that, and if it was a really, really good camera, I might even consider getting one, but I'm still waiting on that. The autofocus seems to suck though at the moment. It's saying down here, both Canon and Nikon have made inroads into the mirrorless market, but time will tell whether Fuji, Panasonic, Sony and Olympus. Well, I think they have to. I'm just going to have a look at some questions down here. Giuseppe said, what do you think of the Sony FE85 1.8, which is just half the price of the Zeiss Batis? From what I've seen, it's basically, some people are saying it's the same lens. I watched, there's a YouTube channel from Canada, I can't remember. It's the camera company, I think, I can't remember, but they did a test recently between the two and they said they were identical. They even discussed whether they thought that the lens was exactly the same. So if you're in the market for a cheap 85, you probably would go the Sony. The issue for me, I suppose, is that, and why I would keep the Batis is because it's weather sealed, and for me that's important shooting weddings, because if I am outdoors and it starts raining, I don't want to have that issue of worrying about whether it's going to be hurt by water. The other thing too is it's stabilized. The Batis is stabilized. So you're getting 5-axis stabilization with that on things like the A7R and the A6500. You're getting 5-axis, whereas that one would only give you 3, the other 85. But if you want to save some money, the results I've seen is fantastic. Manny Otis just did a video on it as well. If you check his YouTube channel, you'll see that he used that as well, and the results he got were gorgeous. So he was raving about that lens. So yeah, I just won't buy it because I've already got the Batis. Life K said, just bought my Sony A7R II yesterday. It's amazing. I know, I love that camera. The sensor on that is incredible. If you check my last video, it will show some of the recovery that you can get from that camera. It's just outstanding. And I love the ability to be able to crop into areas without, you know, I mean, you can get 3 or 4 shots out of this single shot. It's just awesome. The video part to it is great. Low light is great. Yeah, I really love it. Another thing here is also, it's well known that the Fuji lies about their ISO ratings, which I think is insulting to the customer. Yeah, I've read that too before. I'm not sure how that actually goes, but you know what? I've found half of the time, most of these details don't matter. It's what they show. It's the results that matter. You know, if you're using that camera and it gives you what you want and you're happy with it, I tend to not look too much at specifications, because to me, it's the image that matters, nothing else. Now, I'll scroll down too here, because there's a couple of things that it's talking about, saying where are lenses at. Now, this is another interesting thing too. One of the main things that people always used to say about lenses with the Sonys, that the lens range sucks. Fuji obviously has a fantastic lens range, apart from if you're going like into really long ranges, but Sony was lacking, and they still are lacking if you're trying to get very long, you know, 400 millimeters, that sort of stuff. You have to go with adapters, and then you lose your autofocus or whatever, or it's just not fast enough. Sony are addressing that now, and they do seem to be adding more and more and more. To me, to be honest, I think it's a non-issue, because I've got ample lenses for what I'm using at the moment. Now, if you check under this link, you'll see that I've just put a new gear, what I use in there. Now, it's quite extensive because I've listed everything. You'll see in there exactly what I'm using. And I've listed every single item that I use, well, nearly every single thing that you've used, so you can check my lens. But there's also, you know, new companies like Sigma Tamron, well, they're not new, but there's Sigma Tamron coming out now, there's Samyang and Voigtlander that are out, and these are just going to grow. And I think Sony also are tending now to add lenses. I mean, they've just added the new 85, and hopefully, you know, they'll put out a 135 soon. The Batis one, I think, is too expensive for what it is. The issue with the Sony lenses they are too expensive, and that's an issue with the Sony lenses compared to Nikon or Canon. They are a bit expensive. Let's have a look. Someone just said, I just bought my second A7R II. I have 2 now and I love it. Of course, it's not perfect, but I can make do with the negative. And most important, it's best for my shooting style and preferences. And that's the thing, you know, there's always good sides and bad sides to every purchase that you make. Like I said, I do notice the focusing in low light is not as good. And that is definitely not as good as what I was getting out of my digital SLRs and Nikons that I had. I do think that's going to get better, and I have found the focus on the A6500 particularly is really good, but even that starts to hunt a little bit if it gets really, really dim in a very low light reception. That's why I got the 24 1.8, and that seems to have addressed that. But if you want to shoot, you know, a little bit like a 50 mil or whatever and stuff like that, it can get a bit hard if you haven't got like a 1.8 lens. Or if you want to use a 7200 f4, it becomes an issue because it's not fast enough. So then you have to get the G Master 2.8, and then, you know, you're dealing then with a big lens. There's not much else really I don't like about them. Overheating hasn't been an issue with me. I've not had a problem with that. I did have one camera that had an issue, which was the A6300. I got that replaced, and then it never was a problem since. The A6500 and the A7R2, I've never had it overheat, so yeah. Let's have a look at some others. Shellon95 said, it had been tested, but it's not to the point that you are faking your ISO, so people are telling, he's talking there about the full, the ISO for the Fuji. Yeah, you can research that yourselves, I think. There was an issue with that. I know people were saying that the ISO is not as good as what they were trying to make out. John Lambert said, I'm hoping Sony will soon fix the AF issue with the camera flashes. I can't believe they don't work on mirrorless. That is one thing I did miss. When I was using the Nikon, I had the highest end flash. Isn't it funny? I've gone blank now. It was the 900, I think. But that had I think it uses a light beam that you can see out of the flash that gets focus in very dark areas, and it does let you focus in incredibly dim areas. For some reason on the mirrorless side that doesn't work, and I don't know why. There must be some technical reason that it doesn't work. So if anyone knows, if you can chip in the comments, that'd be great. But that is one thing that I do really miss, and I noticed that straight away. So I hope that there is a fix for that too. It's also talking about cameras, obviously smartphone photography. Well, the smartphone photography it's killed the point and shoot, that's for sure. I think the Samsung NEX, they just admitted that it was smartphone photography that killed the NEX camera. So it has hurt, especially that lower end type camera. And there's also an article in here where it's also talking about drones. And they're saying how that's changing it as well. There's a new drone that's just come out, which is the DJI Phantom 4 Pro, that is basically a consumer level drone with a good quality camera. It's the sensor in that, apparently they're saying, is the same as high-end compacts. So for the first time you're getting a consumer drone that is taking, you know, good photos. And I think that was all they were talking about there. Obviously there's a few questions you can read as well. You can get this, like I said, if you look at light stalking and you do it, who are the big players in the photographic world today, you'll sort of see that. I more wanted to talk about whether you think Canon and Nikon, have they missed the boat? Have they left it now too late? Or can they innovate, do you think, to catch up? They have a massive lens catalogue, but like I said, for me, how many lenses do you end up needing? I've got an ample amount now on my Sony, so I think that lens argument now is irrelevant now. There's ample lenses on the Sony, there's ample lenses on the Panasonic Olympus, there's ample lenses on the Fuji. So Alex has said, bought my A7R2 on Thursday. I can't do it justice until I purchase full frame lenses. Yeah, you definitely need full frame lenses to get the best out of it. But you know what? I sometimes use the 10 to 18 millimeter on my A7R2 because it gives 12 millimeters. I've also got the 16 to 35, but that sometimes doesn't give me wide enough. If I'm trying to capture a group shot at a wedding, where at the end of the wedding I bring the whole church all together, sometimes the 16 to 35 isn't wide enough, so I'll throw my 10 to 18 on. It does cut it down to APS-C mode on the, no, you still can use it full frame. You can use that full frame on the A7R2 and get a 12 millimeter. So sometimes I have used them, but you do really need full frame lenses, yes. Alex said looking at getting the 24-70 2.8. Apparently that is a really good lens. I have the 24-70 f4, and I'm not going to buy the 2.8 because again I don't need the weight. I'm tending to shift mostly to prime, so I'm not using really zooms at all. The only zoom I tend to use now is I take the 70 to 200 f4 and I use that for compression in the wedding. If I want to bring the background in, I'll use the 70 to 200. you know, if I want to make the bride look like the background is brought right close to her, I'll use that. Otherwise, I'm using the Batis 85. And I love the 35 1.4 on the full frame lens, obviously. But yeah, so I'm not buying any G Master lenses. I just don't want that. I just don't want that weight. And to be honest, brides are never going to tell the difference. I'm happy with what I'm getting now, and they're loving it. So, but if that's the way you want to go ahead. Alex said the 10 to 18 works great on full frame, almost no vignetting. Yes, and it does. It does. That's Zoom. Chris has said that. And I use that quite a lot. Like I said, if I want something really wide, I'll use that on the A7R2 a lot. I don't have the Gold Master 2470. The only GM I have is the 85, and it's really super, no kidding. Yeah, and you know what? If I hadn't bought the Batis, I probably would have bought that Gold Master 85. But again, I like the light, so I'd probably now tend to go for the 85, the new 85 FE, which is the lighter version. I'd probably go for that. I find 1.8 is enough for me now. I can always pump the ISO up. But the bokeh of the Gold Master 85 is beautiful. Yeah. What else are we looking at down here? Oryx said, hello, in your opinion, what's the sharpest ultra-wide lens for the A6 500? I found these two lenses, the Zeiss Tout 12 and the Samyang 12mm. I haven't used either of those, so it'd be interesting if you did a test and, you know, share those with us, Oryx, because the widest lens I use is the 10 to 18, and I found that's actually really quite good. But the main lens I'm using, like I said, most of the time, 90% on the time now of my Sony A6 500 is the 24 1.8. I adore that lens. But that's the main lens I'm using. I'd even be using that for landscapes. John Lambert said, I second shot a wedding almost entirely with the 70 to 200 f4. Yeah, my second shooter always walks around with a 70 to 200 f4 around the wedding to get shots from a distance. So she is always using that to go around, and I love that lens. It's an amazing lens. And like I said, I take that to every wedding. And I'm using it always for that beautiful compression that I get. And I find f4 is ample for that focal length, and the bokeh is beautiful. SG Pork, I think, said, if A6 500, I'll get the 10 to 18 E-mount, more versatile. Yeah, the 10 to 18 is a great lens, and it's so light, and it's stabilized. It's great for a gimbal. I use that all the time when I've got the camera on a gimbal. It works fantastic. Zoom Chris said, Oryx Bay and I am using the Rocky Non, and I'm very happy with the results. You know, there you go. Zoom Chris said, I believe the Zeiss is better. Yeah, I haven't used that. I wouldn't mind the Zeiss. So it's good that you're helping one another, guys. That's the best part about this, if you can help one another. And you know, it'll be interesting for people that are going to see this, and let's hopefully not be a flame war, you know, and things like that. But it's going to be interesting to see what some Canon and Nikon people say about what they think about they're doing, those corporations, whether they're happy with what they're doing. It's hard to switch, and I found it was very hard to switch. I don't know how much money it cost me to turn. I mean, it did cost me a lot to sell all that gear, but if you don't leave it too late, you don't lose that much. The good part is with Nikon and Canon, they do really hold their value. So, like I said, I sold probably 10 lenses, and they were the high-end lenses. They were all the 2.8 and 1.4s and 1.8s. So I had everything. I had the highest-end Nikon cameras that you can get. So I did have that, but again, I just think, for me personally, I could see the writing on the wall, and I could see what was going to happen, and I wanted to do that before the bottom dropped out of the market. That may not happen, but I'm happy with where I've gone, and I'm happy with where I think Sony is going to go over the next few years. I hope I'm proven right, but like I said, I'm not linked to anyone. I'm not paid by Sony. I'm not paid by anyone. So for me personally, if something really good came out, I would consider switching again. So, you know, I'm certainly not what they call the true fanboy or paid by someone. Any other questions? Community before competition, right? Yeah, true. Yeah. So let's see what you people say. I mean, obviously we can have a discussion once this video is off, because it'll be online on YouTube. Let's see what all you guys think about where you think it's going to go. So I'm interested to see what you've said, and if there's any others that have basically made the big switch like I have. I still get funny looks sometimes from other photographers when I bring out my Sony gear, which is interesting. The thing for me personally is I only have to show people my work. The second people see my work, they can no longer argue. And I don't want to sound big-headed, but if you don't believe in your own work, you shouldn't be a professional. And I am very happy with what I produce. I have a certain style, which some like, some don't, obviously. But brides that hire me, and I am doing 30-odd weddings per year, that's all I want to do. I don't want more than that. Love the work that I do, and I'm booked 2 years in advance. So obviously what I'm doing must be right for someone. So me having a Sony doesn't matter one iota to my brides. It doesn't matter one iota to the fashion photography that I shoot. All they care about is the end result. So don't let anyone try and make you feel bad for using a mirrorless camera, because it's not what matters, it's your results that matter, and that's what you've got to remember. A lot of the fanboys, and I get a lot of hate mail. You wouldn't believe the hate that I get online, and a lot of them I'll just delete because it's just disgusting, but I get a hell of a lot of hate from people who would just slam it. The first thing you can do is check their work. They never have any. Because anyone that is any decent in their work will not slam another photographer. They might give criticism or constructive criticism, but they won't say nasty things about another person's work. I never would do that. So the second that you challenge them, they can never answer you back because they've never got work to answer. So don't let anyone ever make you feel bad for using a mirrorless camera, because trust me, it's your work that matters. It's not the gear that you use. So Zoom Chris said, you get those looks because they are haters, David. I know, and I get so many haters, you wouldn't believe it. I just laugh now. When I first started doing YouTube, I used to get a little bit upset about it because I was probably a bit naive, but now I just laugh about it now, to be honest. The really bad ones I'll just delete, especially if it's on wedding videos and stuff, because my brides often look at those videos, and if there's hate on there, I don't want them to see that, so I'll just delete hate mail. I usually challenge the person first and say, well, show me your work, because that's one way you can sort of say, well, if you are better than me, show me what you're capable of producing. They'd never get back to me. Zoom Chris said, I realised that, and I learned to mock them all the time about the weight and what you see if you get that. I mean, the funny thing is sometimes I'm going to weddings now, and some of the people in the crowd are bringing D4Ss into, in the wedding party are bringing D4Ss in. And they look at me and I'm carrying a small mirrorless camera, but I'm now confident enough with what I produce that doesn't faze me at all. No one has sort of ever come up to me and sort of, tried to make me feel bad about using it. I've had some videographers come up to me and say, wow, you're a photographer and you're using Sony. So I still get that sometimes when I'm working with videographers, and they're a bit shocked that I'm using it. But like I said, the second anyone ever sees my work, that argument's gone. So I'm confident enough to have the work that can back it up. So never let people put you down that way for what you're using. Remember, it's only gear. It's not your eye. It's up here what you're shooting. This is the thing that makes you a photographer. It's not the gear. The gear can help, but you've still got to have the idea. John Lambert said, the only real testing issue I've had with the A7R2 is for when shooting events, is the focusing speed, accuracy, image quality is brilliant. Yeah, and it is, John, that's the thing. I've found it can be an issue with focus, like I said, especially low light, but the secret to that is to use really fast glass. If you use really fast glass now, I'm very confident that I'll get it 98% of the time, and I'll get the occasional one that's out. But I think the secret too is to use center focus. If you're trying to use face detect or something like that, it can be a bit awkward. I tend to always use center focus and focus on that, and then I never have an issue and just recompose. I'll press the button, press the back button focus, which is what I'm using, and recompose, and then the focus seems to lock on. So I personally think that the secret is fast glass and using center focus. Is the thing if you're in really dim light. But when I'm saying really dim light, that's got to be really dim. If it's general light inside with lights on or whatever, and it's what you'd call okay, the focusing's fantastic. Daylight, it's amazing, but really, really dark situations, yes, it can be an issue. But I've used the Zeiss Batis. If you go back to where I shot I think it was last Christmas, I shot one where it had stuff down dark lanes. You couldn't even see them, it was that dark, and I was focusing with the Batis, and the focusing was amazing. So as long as you're using quick lenses, it tends to be pretty good. Alex has said, what would be a great astrophotography lens? Oh, yeah, I've got one. I can't remember what it is. I'll put a note down if I can find it. But I bought one, which is, I think it's a Samyang. It's the 24mm. I think it was the 1.8. I use that for photography, for night astrophotography, and it's beautiful. It's a manual focus lens though, but I'm using that. But some others can chime in. I don't do a heap of photography, but that's the one I bought particularly for that when I went to New Zealand. I was very happy with it. That's a Samyang. Alex said, I'll be in some of the darkest locations in the USA and looking to shoot the Milky Way. Yeah, well, the results I got were fantastic, so I was really happy with what I got. So if any others are doing astrophotography, if you can sort of suggest what that Alex could use, would be a good thing. I think mine is a Rocking-On, actually. I can't remember the Samyang. I think Samyang, because Zoom Chris is saying Rocking-On lenses. I think it's Rocking-On and Samyang are the same, I think. Is that right? I think they are. I think they're the same manufacturer. Depends on where you buy them in the world. It could be them. I know they are the same as something else. I can't remember if it's that lens though, but I know there's something that's the same. Obviously, the faster the lens, the better. So, you know, you have to use manual focusing because you can't use auto focusing, and focus peaking really helps with astrophotography. And I found that was one of the best parts about it, because you would just open it wide up, focusing on your stars, and then as long as they've gone red, you're in focus, and it worked out great for me. Yes, Zoom Presser said, are they the same brand? Yes. Yeah, I thought they were. Yeah, so it's just the name change depending on where you buy them in the world. So is there any other questions before I go on that one? I just wanted to throw this out there. Thought it'd be an interesting discussion for everyone to have. If you think those companies have made the sort of play too late to go mirrorless, whether you think mirrorless is the future, or whether you think digital SLRs will be around for a long, long time yet. So let's have the discussion on that, and we'll see how it goes. So I might leave it there, guys. Oh, David, you didn't answer my question. What was it? What was it, Zoom Chris? Just throw the question back to me so I can see what that was. Oryx has said the Sigma 14mm 1.8 will be great. Yeah, well, there you go. So that would be a good lens. I'm just waiting for Zoom Chris to throw up his question again so I can make sure I can answer it. It'll come up. I'll just check down here. Not sure. If I haven't answered it, Chris, I think it's Chris, is it? Because it just says, oh, hang on. How much of your work is photography and how much is video? Oh, okay, that's a good question. Now, one of the main things that I found with my wedding business is, it used to be that I was just doing all photography. It tends to now be changing. It tends to be going more into like they say, fusion, where I'm mixing videography and photography at the same time. And you'd laugh if you saw me, because I'm often carrying two cameras in my hand. I'll have the A7R II in one hand and I'll be carrying the A6500 in another. That's the beauty of these cameras being so light. But probably, I'd say 60% of my weddings now have got the video package installed. They buy that package extra. And, you know, I'm earning over $1,000 extra on that. So it's a great feature to add on. So it has given me a big plus in them basically not having to, I suppose, having to hire a videographer. They can now just hire me. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do, but some are just doing it. Now I'm just offering it. The reason why I did this is because there's so many photographers out there competing for work. I wanted to try and get something that was a little bit different. Now, I wanted to try and offer that service myself, rather than having to hire two separate people, having to work with a videographer. I can now do everything all in one at one time. I'm only offering a highlight reel though, which means it's a 4 to 5 minute highlight reel to video, which you'll see on my channel if you look at them. I'm getting a lot better at doing this now than what I did when I first started. There is a big learning curve, but I am getting a lot better at doing it. And I'm really getting to the point where I'm quite happy with what I'm doing. And now I'm starting to get inquiries now about doing video solely. At this stage, I'm not doing that because I have enough work doing both. And probably my love is still the photography side really at this stage. But I really do enjoy doing video. I love that aspect of it. I love the movement. I love the editing. I'm using Final Cut Pro. And I'll show how I work that one day through here, and I'll show you how I put together a wedding. But yeah, so now I am getting a lot, and it has made a big difference for me here. I don't know what it's like in the States or in the UK, but it's made a massive difference for me to get work because I can offer both at the same time. And video is also very hard. So it's an area where I'm getting work because others don't want to do video so much. Here in Australia, honestly, every second person is a photographer. Every second person is doing baby shoots, is doing portraits and stuff like that. Now, it's probably the same in the States. Not many are offering video because it is hard. So I've tried to tend to add that in now, so it is a real added benefit for my business. And I'm offering Fusion now all the time, and it's making a massive difference in getting bookings. Every time a bride comes in and I mention that package, they're nearly always taking it now, so it's an added on for me. Also, it means they're not looking at someone else. They're not going to another photographer where they'd have to work with a photographer and a videographer and pay big money to both. So it's made a big difference with my business. Yeah, and like I said, I enjoy doing it too. I'll just see what some other people have put up here. Is there a contemporary photographer you admire? Yeah, probably Joe McNally. I really still love his work. I came from Nikon, obviously, so I love Joe McNally's work. I love his flash. I'm very strong in flash, and I use flash extensively in my work. I think that's one of the big differences between being a reasonable photographer and what you call a really good photographer that's in demand, is to have good flash work, because it really separates you from mainstream. Obviously, natural light shooting is amazing as well if you're very good at it, but I do still think, for me personally, I love to bring flash in, and I do shoot quite dark, which then gives that contrast, you know, of using flash. And I'll show my flash setup soon. I'm going to show all of the pro photo gear that I use in my Sony flashes. I'll do that as a separate YouTube video. So Joe McNally, yeah, is definitely one. I really like the up-and-coming photographers, like Manny Otis is doing some really good work now that you sort of see. Obviously, if you're on Sony side, Jason Lanier does some really good work as well. You know, they're sort of contemporary photographers. But you know what, I tend to now, I love people like Joe McNally who really involves himself in light, and he's a light shaper, and you know, I love that side of it too. Let me just have another look at some questions before we finish. Daniel Hoffman said, I got the A7R II and the 16-35 to replace the D810 and the 14-24 for travel, landscape photography. What would you recommend for weddings between 20 to 35 mil? That is fast. Daniel, definitely the 35 1.4. That is my favorite lens, and that's on my camera 80% of the time. I do have the 55 and the Zeiss Batis 85, but the one I'm using more than anything is the 35 1.4, and I'm tending to shoot, if I'm using my A7R II, because the file size is so big on that camera, I'm tending to use that in APS-C mode, so it gives you around about an 18 megapixel, I think, or 19 megapixel size. I don't need to generally do, I'll tell you how it works. With me, for the things like makeup, getting ready, the boys getting ready, I don't need a massive file, so I'm not using it on full frame. I'm using it on APS-C mode, 35mm mode, Super 35. That way the 35s give me around about a 50mm, which is still a great focal length, so I'm sort of sacrificing it to be a bit wider, but still using the 1.4 lens. As soon as I'm doing the portraits where you're taking the bride and groom and the wedding party away, the formals, I then switch into full frame mode, because those to me are the main images that I want to sell to the bride and groom. They're the ones that really matter in putting in their album and things like that. So they're the files that I'm actually using the big images on. I'm using the full frame, doing it that way too. But 35 1.4 definitely for that, Daniel. Zoom Chris said, have a great day, David. Thanks for your answer. Always a pleasure to be in your live vids. It's great. Thanks, mate, so much. I absolutely love the community spirit and just talking to people and stuff like that. And, you know, I just hope as this grows and stuff like that, it just stays this way. I'll never, and I can promise you that, I will never sell out to anyone. I always want to give an honest opinion of anything without having to sort of justify it by being, you know, paid by someone and stuff like that. And if someone ever did give me gear to sort of look at, I'd tell you right up front that it's actually been sent to me as a loaner. Rick Menton said you'll be on every Sunday Eve at this time. Not sure, Rick. I'm on all over the place. I just basically, because I'm full time, it depends when I'm shooting. It depends what I'm doing at that time, whether I'm editing, whether I've got wedding meetings on, you know, if I'm out sort of doing location scouting. So really, I can't sort of say that I'll be on at this time, but yeah, I sort of tend to come on often around about this time. Because basically I've got back from what I'm doing in the morning. I've just had lunch and then I come out. Zoom Chris said, are you a Catholic? I am actually a Catholic. And it is Easter this weekend. So yeah, happy Easter to you, mate, too. John Lambert said, thanks again for the chat, mate. Appreciate it. No problem. Oryx said, thank you so much, David. Have a great day. Well, we might leave it there, mate. If you've got any questions, like I said, leave them down below, and I always answer questions. If you do have questions, I'll always answer. If I can't answer them, I'll be honest and say hopefully someone else can answer. And I'll have another video up soon. I want to try and, like I said, if you want to check the gear I've used, I've put that under the description in here, so you can check all of the lenses that I'm using for the Sony side and what flash systems I'm using. I am going to do a video soon showing all the Pro Photo gear and why I'm using that and what attachments I'm using with that. Now, I know it's very high end, but it might still give you an idea about the light shapers I use. So I'll be discussing that and why I use a certain light shaper for a certain thing. So I'll talk about that soon as well. And obviously I'll have some shoots coming up as well soon as well. At the moment I'm flat out. This is high wedding season here in Melbourne, and I'm incredibly busy editing weddings and getting those done. So that sort of slowed down my live shoots at this stage. And I also want to give you some ideas about how I run my wedding business. I want to talk to you about the wedding software that I use to collate it all, to add contracts in, to do things like that. So I'm going to be sharing all that stuff with you as well. I'm totally open about sharing what I do. Remember, I came from a teaching background, so for me, this is my natural thing to do. I don't hide anything. So I want to show you how I run my wedding business. You know, I can talk to you about how I talk to clients, how I set that up, about advertising, and all those sort of things are going to come up in future videos. So if you can, give me a thumbs up. That helps support my channel. And obviously, just keep firing questions and I'll get back to you soon. So we'll end it there, guys. Thanks for that, and I'll see you again soon. Bye for now.